In today's video, we're going to be going over your first freeze for many of you in the Midwest. We're also going to be going over some chillier temperatures, which are going to enter the east, especially as we get to later into the month. So as we get probably closer to next week is when those colder temperatures should really set in for the eastern United States. We're going to drop below freezing, again, for many of you in the Midwest and the Rockies. So we're going to give you a detailed breakdown of the next couple of days when it comes to the temperatures. So let's start off with your weather photo of the day. We had a picture sent in by Francesca N. So if you ever want to send in a photo, just send it over to my email address, which is on the bottom of the screen right here, but it's also in the description down below. It's just a picture of some clouds, a wall of clouds approaching. I'm not sure where this was taken from, but it is, of course, a great picture. Thank you for sending that in. And again, that was from Francesca. If you want to send in your pictures, send them to that email address. And again, it doesn't even have to be anything spectacular. It could just be a cool cloud that you see in the sky. Maybe you get a little bit of snow and you want to send that in. If you get some changing leaf colors, you can also send that in as well. Anything really is that's weather related, just snap a picture of it and send it in, and it will probably be featured in the beginning of that video. So thank you again to Francesca for sending that in. And again, if you guys have any photos that you want to send in, feel free to do so. So let's start off with your current National Weather Service page. You can see that we have some winter storm watches up for Eastern California in the Sierra Nevadas. We have some flood watches up for Northern California, as well as some wind advisories for Northern California and Southern Oregon. We have some frost advisories for parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, and Wisconsin, as well as, and actually one county in Minnesota. And then we have some freeze warnings for parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. But just because the freeze warnings stop right here does not mean that these areas to the north won't also be dealing with a freeze. The way this works is that once you get your first freeze of the season, so once you drop below 32 degrees one time that year, you stop getting freeze warning. So that's why you don't get a freeze warning every single morning in January. You only get it that first couple of times when you could possibly drop below 32. Same thing applies for the frost advisory. So you're only going to see this up maybe a couple times a year because they only put it up for the first few times that you drop below 36 degrees where a frost is possible. But they're not going to put it out every single day because, of course, as you get deeper into the winter, you would have pretty much most of the country under a freeze warning or a frost advisory. So they just only put it out for the areas that haven't seen it already, and that's just kind of a warning that you want to start wrapping up with any sort of vegetation that you have outside. You want to start bringing that inside because, of course, the weather conditions are becoming a little bit more dangerous for those plants with the colder temperatures. Yesterday we had a high temperature of 98 degrees in Rio Grande Village, Texas, with a low temperature of 11 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah. Highest rainfall report of 6.74 inches in Fairfield, California, which is just northeast of San Jose, I believe. And then the high snowfall report was 21 miles east-northeast of Shirley Basin, Wyoming, where they got 12.5 inches of snowfall. So let's take a look at the forecasted low temperatures for the Midwest in specific, but we're going to also look at the entire United States in just a couple moments. So we're looking at for tomorrow morning. So this is 12 a.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Central Time. So this is the minimum temperature over a 6-hour time frame. So this would go from about 4 a.m. To 10 a.m. Central Time, and this is the lowest temperature within that point. And you can see that a lot of areas get down to 33, 34, maybe some areas dropping below 32 degrees. You can see that over some parts of Iowa and Minnesota. You can also see that into North Dakota and northern Minnesota. But for the most part, a lot of these areas are at least below 36. So I would say if you live northwest of this line, there's a fairly good shot that you at least get maybe a frost, or at the very least, you get some sort of accumulation of some light ice or frost somewhere, especially on cars. That'll probably accumulate a little bit more. You might have to heat up the car before you go to work in the morning, because it will definitely be a little bit chilly tomorrow morning. But as we get to Saturday, I think this is when it becomes a little bit more, a little bit colder over a widespread area. So if we look at Friday again, one more time, which I'll go back here. For Friday, you can see that we only had a few areas that were really below 32. We had some of these spots in Iowa, and then maybe if you hugged along the Canadian border, you would also find a few below 32-degree temperatures. But if we look at this for Saturday, you can see that now we're looking at Saturday morning, some of these low temperatures that are over a fairly wide area of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, even Illinois, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, getting below 32 degrees. So I think if you're going to get a freeze, this is when you would get it. It would probably be Saturday, more so than Friday. Friday's just going to be maybe a few degrees warmer than what we're expecting on Saturday. But also note that if you live just a little bit further to the south, so in Kansas or Missouri, it will actually be fairly warm. So we're not dealing with anything incredibly cold down there. There's going to be a stark division in these temperatures. Now, looking at the wind chills in the morning, you can see that for tomorrow. Tomorrow morning when you're going out for school or for work, you can see that we have these wind chills which are going to be down into the 20s over much of the Midwest. Even if you go up near the Canadian border, you might even get some wind chills into the teens. So very, very cold, but the winds will pick up as we get into Saturday. So if you look at the wind chill map, you can see that it's actually much colder on Saturday than it was on Friday in terms of how it's actually going to feel like. So these are not the actual temperatures, but when you go outside and you feel a little bit of a wind, especially when it's below, I would say 40 degrees, it really does start to feel much chillier than that actual temperature. So if it's maybe, let's say 35 degrees with no wind, it's probably going to feel right around 35 degrees. But if you get a maybe 15, 20, 25 mile per hour wind, well now, especially depending on what direction, especially if it's coming out of the north, well then now it's going to feel much colder. You're looking at a feels like temperature probably down in the 20s or the teens, and depending where the air is coming from, maybe even into the single digits. Now, it's not going to be that ferocious with this. We're going to be dealing with winds 10 to 15 miles per hour, but even that light amount of wind will allow some really chilly feels like temperatures for Saturday morning. So we're going to get down into the 20s for these areas. Now, if we just look at this for the entire United States, here is for Friday morning. You can see that the cold air all bottled up into the Midwest. So you get east of there, you're not really dealing with anything significantly cold. Same thing as you get further to the west, nothing really significantly cold. Mainly the below freezing temperatures are in the higher elevations. If we move this on to Saturday, the cold air maybe makes its way a little bit further to the east. So if you live in an area of the interior northeast, maybe you get a little bit colder. You could even see a little bit of a freeze or a frost in parts like Vermont, western Massachusetts, eastern New York, northern New Hampshire. But the rest of these areas will probably stay fairly mild as we get into Saturday. Now, as we move into Sunday, this is where we start to get a few questions. Now, first of all, how far south does this colder line get? Now, a few days ago, we were looking at this line being a little bit further to the south by, I would say, 50 to 100 miles. Now it's moved up a little bit. But either way, if you're above that line, you're going to be relatively cold. And again, just how far south does this line get for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday? Because this looked like it was going to be one of your first chances to get frost if you live in the Mid-Atlantic or the coastal Northeast, same as if you live in parts of the lower Ohio Valley or even the Tennessee Valley. But that's all going to be really dependent on how deep this trough can actually get. And one of the reasons also that might not dip as far south is because now you have that low pressure hugging the coast a little bit more. So instead of having that low pressure all the way down here sinking the entire eastern United States into a colder pattern, because that low pressure was kind of acting like an anchor to steer this trough to the south. Well, now that it's a little bit further to the north, that trough doesn't have to dive down as far, so now it's not really providing as deep of a cold air system. So this would be by Monday, and you can see still very cold into the northeast relative to this time of year. Upper Great Lakes maybe getting in on some of the colder temperatures. I'm not going to go out further than that because, again, it is still too far out to really tell, and especially with how volatile these models have been, usually when you're especially in the summertime, you can look out 10 days, but I've found out that really looking at how these models have performed over the past 2 weeks, they haven't been too great, especially after 7 days, 5 days even in some scenarios. So I'm going to halt it there in terms of the surface temperatures. We'll look at the 10-day outlook on the upper air maps, however, because they can be a little bit more reliable. If you look at it for Saturday, you can see that we have a big trough into the eastern United States. So we have an area of low pressure up in Ontario that kind of brings down the entire jet stream a little bit further to the south. You also have another trough into the west. So basically what's happening is that you have that trough in the west, you have that ridge in the central part of the country, and then you have another trough in the eastern United States. So we have this one little ridge up through the central United States, and that's causing a little bit of a ripple effect on either side of the country, which brings in those colder temperatures. Now, as this system in the west starts to deepen a little bit, that's going to start to make a little bit more ridging into the eastern United States, because if you have something so deep in the west, it's going to have to rebound. So instead of this rebound being confined to the central United States, well, now this rebound is actually going all the way up into Canada, and you have a high pressure developing into Ontario and Quebec. So this is a little bit of a warmer pattern, or at least it would seem like that, but there is one saving grace for those of you who like cold and snow, or just really cold in this instance. You have this low pressure in Illinois and Indiana. So as this moves further to the east, even though on the upper air maps you're going to see some of the orange and red colors indicating high pressure, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be colder, because as this slides to the east, it will have the possibility of bringing in northwesterly winds, which is really coming out of Ontario, Manitoba, James Bay in Canada. So these really cold areas up in here, which have average temperatures this time of year in the 30s Fahrenheit, and that's all going to be coming down into the eastern United States, and that's going to depend on how deep this little system can get. So this would be by Monday of this week. Let's move this on to Wednesday, and here's what happens. We have that low pressure moving from Illinois all the way to offshore of the mid-Atlantic, but at this time, the only area that would really be getting in on that northwesterly wind would be New England, because anywhere west of there, you're really in more of a southerly flow, actually coming out of the southwest, which is typically quite a warm flow. Now, it will be chilly in the central United States, but you're going to have to wait in the east for this system to pull through in order for you to get the colder temperatures. Now, for those of you who do like cold and snow in the east, good news, because this system does move into the east, and we see basically the polar opposite of what's going to be happening this weekend happen next late week, so late next week, so sometime around Friday or Saturday. So we started off this week, or this upcoming week, so right around Sunday and Monday, we're starting off with a very deep trough into the west, and we're going to end off the week with a very deep trough into the east. And in this case, this would be a combination of a couple systems. We have one down here and another one up here, so they're just kind of forming and combining together to create one bigger system that creates ridging over the west. So that's really the type of weather pattern we would be going into. Now, watch out for what we have out west, again, in British Columbia and off the shore of the Pacific coast, because we do have another system brewing there. Now, this is going to be a very volatile pattern. We're not going to see anything really stay in place. It's going to be moving back and forth. You're going to have this, we've already seen this really, just going through this one model run. You've seen if you were to take maybe just one given point, let's just pick Kansas, for example. They are going to start off with a actually rather chilly day tomorrow, and then as we get into Saturday, they're going to start to get a little bit warmer, maybe all the way until Monday. Then it becomes a little bit colder for a couple days, and then by the end of the week, you're back into a bit of a limbo stage where you're a little bit colder, and then maybe in a couple days, by Saturday or Sunday of next week, you get a little bit warmer. So you could pick any single spot on this map, and you would be able to see a huge temperature differential between any 3 or 4 given days. So that's really the type of pattern we're in. It's up and down, and it's because there's really nothing holding it in place. You're going to have systems that are going to originate over the Pacific. You have a very active Pacific right now, and so what that's going to do is create troughing out in the west. That creates ridging in the central United States and more troughing out for the east, and that entire pattern is cycling across the country. So at some portion of that pattern, the east will be warmer. At some portion of that pattern, the west will be colder, and vice versa. So really, there's not going to be any stability to the next I would say 2 to 3 weeks in terms of the pattern. And then it's really just going to be up to chance whether we go into more of a colder pattern or a warmer pattern as we're going into early to mid-November. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. We had a lot to cover. I wanted to first start off with the more specific details for the Midwest, because I know that could be very useful for those of you who especially have gardens or any type of plants outside, or if you're a farmer in that area that you really need to be on top of what the temperatures are going to be. So I wanted to include that in the beginning of the video, and then I could go a little bit more general towards the end, because the end part of the videos usually are more of a general based discussion around the pattern, but I like to be more specific, especially in the beginning. Again, if you have any weather photos that you want to send in, so especially as we're getting into the winter, if you have any cool fall foliage pictures, if you have any snow pictures, maybe you see your first frost and it's actually visible, and you want to send that in, definitely feel free to share that on my email, and I'll feature it in the video. Really anything that you see, if you see any cool ice crystal formations as we get deeper into the winter, of course, send those in. So really anything weather related that you want to send in, even if it's just a cool cloud or a cool sunset that you happen to get a picture of, again, just send those in. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll be responding within a few hours of you posting them. And I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.